me turn my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo. Where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello, welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course, and today's Thursday, so it means it's time for our Thursday Trends episode. Man, it's almost like Thursday Scaries. I know it's Sunday Scaries is a thing. I'm trying to think of what another name for Thursdays should be now, because this is like when we talk about, you know, all the nonsense happening in the world. And, yeah, keeping with that same theme, unfortunately, it's another week of that. But, you know, I don't know why I'm rationalizing it, but it's important to stay informed, to have some grip of what's happening, right? So with that in mind, we're going to talk about what is happening in the press and what seems like, what feels like an unprecedented, at least in this country, attack on the press by the powers that be. We'll talk about that. We will talk about some new ICE data that is showing the lies that were told to many in the Latin community about what immigrants will be targeted as far as who will be deported. We've seen some new statistics revealing that they are not just targeting criminals, so we'll talk about that. And on the topic of immigration, proof of it's not about the powers that be not wanting people to come into this country. It's they don't want specific people to come into this country. So we will talk about that. On a positive side of things, let's celebrate an actress who is finally getting her due after years and years. Somebody from our community. We'll talk about that in our Mi Gente segment. But first and foremost, let's dive into the nonsense, the BS, as we always do in a segment we call For the People in the Back.
Say it louder for the people in the back. Say it louder for the people in the back.
Let's start with the press, right? Loosely, I'm a member of the press, right? I have a show, a podcast, a platform. And the beauty of living in the United States of America as opposed to other places around the globe, dictatorships and communist regimes living underneath them, is that you and I have the freedom to express our opinions even if they are not favorable to those that are in power, right? The fact that I can sit down, record, and broadcast this show to potentially anyone around the globe and say whatever I want about our current president, you know, with some concessions made for, obviously, potential threats, right? But I can have an opinion about this person, about our government, about what's happening in this country. That's the beauty of democracy, right? And it's one of the things we sort of rested our hats on, right? And this country was founded upon. And part of that is the freedom of press, right? The idea that we won't be silencing people just because they have a differing point of view, right? I don't like Fox News. I think that they should be ashamed for the nonsense they put out there and probably should be under a finer microscope, if you will, and have to suffer repercussions for knowingly putting lies out there. But I do believe in their right to exist, to display their opinion and their love for Donald Trump. Unfortunately, we are moving in a direction, and we've been warned about this, but nobody listened on this last election, apparently, about Donald Trump's authoritarian tendencies. And we're beginning to see it in various ways, one of the latest examples being what he is doing in terms of the press and those he's trying to silence or punish for not agreeing with him, right? It first started with the Associated Press, who was not allowed in I believe it was when he was signing an executive order. They weren't given the credentials to be present for it, even though they've been there in the past. Many suspected that this was allegedly a retaliation for the fact that the Associated Press refused to acknowledge the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America. And now it seems that things are going even further when it comes to the press pool. Now, the press pool is when the president holds an event in a small location, be it aboard Air Force One or in the Oval Office, for example. There are a limited number of journalists who can, report on what happens, who are allowed to be in the room. So essentially, and I'm getting this from MSNBC.com as they describe it, what happens is the small number of outlets allowed in there essentially work with other outlets in conjunction to share what happened in that event, or to essentially, it's like collaborating with content or whatever it might be, right? And for several decades, the White House Correspondents Association, which is a sort of non-biased external organization that grants credentials, essentially, they've determined which journalists serve in the daily pool. Again, this has been going on for decades. They are a non-biased, as I said, organization that has historically, since these decades have gone on, done their best to keep diverse outlets, give these diverse outlets the opportunity to report and be a part of these moments, right? And when I say diverse, I mean anything from super conservative far-right publications to ones that are Democratic leaning. Now, Trump has decided on a new model. In the article, MSNBC says, quote, "The White House says it will decide which reporters are permitted to participate in the presidential pool in a move that will break from decades of precedent." White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Tuesday that the White House Correspondents Association would no longer get to say which journalists get to ask questions of the President of the United States. Now, the White House press secretary also went on to say, quote, "I am proud to announce that we are going to give the power back to the people who read your papers, who watch your television shows, and who listen to your radio stations." Okay? I love how they spin these things. Like, no, it's like we're only gonna, it's only gonna be outlets people care about. Who's determining that? Well, it's Donald Trump. And when you see some of the questions that are being lofted at him, he's purposely empowering those who are only going to tee up these softball, questions that will paint him in the best light, that won't challenge him to explain himself, right? Won't put him in difficult situations to justify why he is or isn't doing something, which is what we need, right? You are the leader of the free world, essentially. The President of the United States of America, arguably the most powerful person in the world. It's not supposed to be an easy job. You're supposed to be able to explain yourself. You're supposed to be held accountable for the things you do and say. And the press is an important part of that. Now, this is only a small beginning stage. And some might say, well, does it really matter at the end of the day? Is it that big of a deal? And sure, Donald Trump being there or making himself available, I should say, to multiple outlets while he signs some executive order on whatever the fuck he's doing, is that going to stop the information from getting out there? No, we don't live in a vacuum where that would happen immediately. But this is just the beginning, and that's the warning that I would put out there to people who try to downplay something like this. Remember, places like China and Russia have their media purposely blocking any negative talk of their leaders. They're kept in the dark as to what's happening in the outside world. That's how they are controlled. They're lied to. They're given propagandist ideas that paint their leader in the best light. North Korea, same thing. If I'm not mistaken, North Korea makes all kinds of crazy claims about their leader, Kim Jong-un. Like weird stuff that makes no sense. That has nothing to do with politics. I'm not even going to say any fake information, but I feel like I've read that somewhere. Allegedly. But that's the danger, because when the information begins to get filtered, it's like a game of telephone, right? The message that starts at the beginning is not the one that we end up with at the end of the line, essentially. And if we're not getting firsthand information, or if this is just the beginning, and what if now he begins to make more and more attacks on the media, the leaders of these companies, these corporations that own organizations like MSNBC or CNN or whatever it might be, are business people at the end of the day. And they're worried about their bottom line. And if he can instill sanctions or blocks upon them that begins to hurt their bottom line, they're going to react accordingly. And we, the everyday person seeking out real information, are going to be the ones who suffer. Because as it is, those who watch Fox News don't get an accurate depiction as to what's going on. They don't fact check Donald Trump on a regular basis. They repeat a lot of his nonsense. So when you talk to somebody who only watches Fox News and thinks that that's reality, you can see it and hear it, that they have a very distorted version of what's actually happening. Now imagine if that becomes the norm, blanketed against every media outlet that we have, or every mainstream one. That becomes a scary inclination of where this country could be heading, and potentially us becoming like a place like China or Russia, where their leaders purposely keep the citizens in the dark to paint themselves in the best light. And that's not what's best for this country. That's literally the thing that we rest our hat on, that we are not like these other places that we look down upon, right? So, something to keep an eye on, something scary, something, I don't know, another thing to keep an eye on, I guess I should say. Now, I want to talk a bit about immigration and ICE, and also this, if you can call it, immigration reform proposal that Donald Trump has put out there. We're going to get into that. We'll take a quick break right now, and then we'll be right back. All right, we are back, and let's touch on immigration here. Right, we all are well aware, I'm sure, at this point, of ICE raids being on the rise and arrests being on the rise, and we've heard of disgusting practices like shipping undocumented migrants to Guantanamo Bay, even those without a criminal record. And for those who aren't aware, Guantanamo Bay is a prison where we hold literally the worst of the worst, where terrorists are held. And now there's new data that goes against what Donald Trump has been promising or what he campaigned upon, and spits right in the face of Latinos who voted for Trump or supported him under the inclination that he was only getting rid of the criminals, right? That's all he cared about. And you even had, I don't remember what the organization is called, but it's a Venezuelan organization. This woman was parading around on TV, caping for Donald Trump during election season, and now has backtracked after realizing that he's deporting even those who have status in this country. They actually were even targeting people who were checking in for normal immigration hearings. But there's new data here, and I'm getting this from wearemetoo.com. As always, links will be in the show notes. They say that 41% of ICE arrests are people with no criminal background, no criminal record. Almost half of the people that ICE is arresting have no criminal background. Now, in the past, quote-unquote border czar Tom Homan has said we're going to concentrate on the worst of the worst. Quote, it's going to be a lot different than what liberal media is saying it's going to be. Yet, that's not what's actually happening. As often we've seen with this president and this administration. And I know that a lot of people will say, oh, well, they're criminals for crossing the border. Well, technically, legally speaking, it's a civil violation. That's similar to something like jaywalking. These aren't criminals. These are also people that are paying into the system. But this is just further evidence as a whole, as we zoom out, that it's never been about making the streets safer, of cracking down on criminals. Quite frankly, it's never been about even doing their job well, as we've seen with Elon Musk and how they've had to backtrack so many things that they've done because they are just operating in a bullish manner. And as I've always said, when you're dealing with people's lives and livelihood, you can't just throw your hands up and say, hey, mistakes are going to be made, but we'll do our best to admit them when they happen. This is not a game. Your fuck up could potentially ruin the lives of an entire family, from laying off workers unnecessarily to deporting people who are here working their ass off just like anybody else and staying out of trouble. But again, it's never been about doing what's right. It's never been about keeping us safe. They have their agenda. They don't want to see brown people in this country. They want white America to be thriving again. And they paint these little pictures and like tell you these little lies and gaslight the people of color who support them into believing that they're somehow special, that they're not a part of this. But time and time again, they prove you to be a fool. And this is just another example. Again, if it was truly about making this country safer, you'd be far more tactical in targeting criminals rather than just blanket targeting every immigrant that exists in this country. Again, almost half of the people that ICE has arrested have no criminal record. Like it's nonsense. And if you wanted further evidence as to the real motivation behind immigration or how they really feel about immigration, Donald Trump has floated the idea of having an immigration gold card. Instead of a green card, it's a gold card. And the price on the gold card is $5 million. So for $5 million, you would get a visa, essentially. The New York Times reported, quote, President Trump on Tuesday previewed his plans for a new visa program he was calling the Gold Card, describing it as somewhat like a green card, but a higher level of sophistication. The blingy new program would allow, quote, very high-level people a new route to citizenship, Mr. Trump said. The price tag, he said, would be about $5 million. And what you're going to end up having here is you're going to have people who support him who are not wealthy, who couldn't afford a $5 million gold card if they needed to. They're going to defend this by saying, how great is that? you're going to be bringing wealthy people into the country. They're going to buy this car and it's going to bring in income for the country, which sure, that might be true. And wealthy people are going to create jobs and it's going to trickle down. They live in a fucking fantasy world. Because when have wealthy people ever given a shit about helping out those in need? What he's trying to do is bring more elitists into the country, people like Elon Musk, who literally have zero empathy for anybody who is struggling and view everybody as just a number and view everybody as replaceable. These are people who operate businesses via the blueprint of, how do I pay my employee the least amount of money? How do I create the cheapest product? And how do I drive home the greatest revenue? And the only person that benefits in that scenario is the people in charge, the few in charge, the board members, the CEO, the shareholders. Everybody else gets fucked in that deal. And who is everybody else? They're the everyday person who's just trying to get by. So sure, let's bring more of those types of people into this country. It's like gentrification, essentially, right? What happens when an area gets gentrified? And this happens always, no matter if it's the best efforts, right? Best intentions. Because greed always kicks in. You have an area that used to be rough. And then what happens? Maybe artists start moving into the area, young entrepreneurs, young professionals. They start fixing up the area. It becomes attractive to those with money. Developers begin buying up as much as they possibly can. They knock down buildings, build up new ones. They bring in franchises. They bring in big businesses. Bring in high-level clients to buy real estate. And little by little, they turn the area into a haven for rich people, and one that the everyday person can no longer afford. Is it cleaning up the area and is it, helping make the area safer? Sure. There's an argument to be made about some of the positive effects. But the problem is the pendulum always harshly swings in favor of the rich people. Because the greed doesn't stop. They don't stop when they say, you know what, we've done a great job. The area is a lot safer. We have a great mix of people who are adding to the community and those who have been here for a while, and everybody's working in conjunction to really keep up with the place. We have a thriving local economy here. No, they don't stop at that point. They say, how can I squeeze out more and more? As a landlord, how can I throw out this tenant who's been here forever because I know I'm going to get a rich white person usually to come and pay me double the money? Developers, how can I buy up even more real estate here and knock down even more buildings to build even more expensive high-rises until it just becomes a yuppie paradise that only the elites can afford and everybody else gets pushed out? And that happens city to city, town to town. But now, proposals like this one potentially leave us in a place where the country, the United States of America, that's what they're trying to build. They're trying to build a United States of America where only the wealthiest of the wealthiest can survive. Where they can accumulate excessive amounts of wealth and control the working class by giving them just enough to barely survive, paycheck to paycheck. Just enough. Meanwhile, they are just printing money and taking advantage in every way possible. That's the world, that's the country they're trying to create. And again, look at this proposal. It also tells you that if they wanted to, they could fast track the visa process. They could fast track citizenship. But they don't want to. This isn't about making sure that people are documented and are here legally and all these things. No. Once again, plans like this reveal their true intentions. They want a certain type of person here in this country. That's why they have a problem with immigration, because they don't want the country to be diverse. They don't want the workplace to be diverse. They want to revert back to when white America was the majority. That makes them comfortable. That's where they can become the most profitable. That's why they want to get rid of DEI and all these different things. And again, they showcase, plans like this showcase their real intentions. And they'll lie to the everyday person who is their base and create a boogeyman out of immigrants. But then turn around and really show you who they're trying to bring in. And then lie to you and make you think that this is a good thing for you. That you, as somebody making $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year, that's a bunch of billionaires coming into this country, is somehow, some way going to make your life better. Just a wild, I don't know. I would say wild world we live in. Just idiotic. It's an idiotic concept and belief that we think rich people, rich white people, not only give a shit, but let's just say they do have a heart. But they can't relate to the everyday person whatsoever, so they have no idea where to truly help, even if they want to. This is an argument made about the people on not the boards of nonprofits. And there's a book, I can't remember the name of it offhand right now. But essentially was poking at the idea of nonprofits, because he was saying these nonprofit organizations that do charitable work, the people that sit on their board are fellow millionaires and billionaires. And those people on the board are in charge of deciding what to do with the funds from that charity and how that charity operates. What does that millionaire or billionaire know about the people that the charity is intended to serve? Right? If it's a charity for inner city youth, what the fuck does this privileged white Harvard third generation graduate know about a kid growing up in the inner city? Again, even if their best case scenario, their heart is in the best place, they have no knowledge or experience to know how they can be most effective in helping people. And that is where the issue lies. That even those who have money who want to help, they still exist in a bubble where they only are around their own peers who are also wealthy people. Therefore, they have no idea how the other half lives, and even if they wanted to, don't know how to properly help. And that's why the whole idea of a trickle-down economy or, the goodwill of those who are fortunate never truly works, because they still live in their own bubble and have no idea what it's like to actually struggle. Well, that's the update on the world's the current state, specifically this country, I guess. With that said, we will move into some positivity here. We'll take a quick break, and then we'll be right back. All right, so on the positive side of things, the queen that is actress Zoe Saldaña, she is actually nominated for an Oscar. This is her first nomination, which was crazy to me. I had to look this up. Zoe Saldaña, she's been in I don't know why I just blanked on the movie with the fucking where everybody's blue. I know it starts with an A. Or am I really gonna have to Google this? I just had it like on my head. Zoe Blue movie. That did not give me Avatar. I looked. I remembered it before I actually Googled it just now. Avatar. She's been in a ton of movies. I think I've talked about her. She is a part of like some of the highest grossing movies of all time, and never nominated for an Oscar. This weekend on Sunday is the Academy Awards. Her first time being nominated. She's being nominated for the movie Emilia Perez. I'm not gonna lie to you. I tried to watch this movie. I hate musicals like with a fucking passion. I just do. They bother me. I wish I wasn't like this. I tried to watch it, and every time they broke out into dance, I was just so frustrated because I was like, I want to follow a story. It's interesting, but you know, I tried. I watched like 20 minutes of it. Anyway, now, not to jinx her, but according to this article on Hola.com, they're actually saying it'd be atypical for her to lose this Oscar, in keeping with award season tradition. So last Sunday, she won the Screen Actors Guild Award, and they say a moment that pinpointed her as the clear favorite for the Oscars race. Statistics show that actresses who win the SAG Award for Best Actress in a Supporting Role are likely to win the Oscar in the same year. This tradition dates back to 2018, with actresses like Laura Dern, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Davine Joy Randolph winning the Oscar shortly after. The last actress to break the statistic was Emily Blunt, who won the SAG Award in 2018 for her work in A Quiet Place. Her win was atypical that year, considering she wasn't nominated for the Oscars. Wasn't nominated for an Oscar for that. But just in general, what an amazing, like, when you look at people you look up to, and sometimes I'm involved in entertainment, but I also kind of like just turn a blind eye to like a lot of it. So I feel like I'm not, I don't know, as I've gotten older, I used to be a movie buff when I was younger, but I've like, as I've gotten busier, I've just, I don't know, my attention span, and I'm just always working. I have less and less time to like, I have less and less time that I care to sit and watch an entire movie. I'll watch it in parts. It takes me like a week to finish a movie. But she has always been holding down for the community. And even recently, she had a BAFTA win, and she dedicated to her trans nephew and the trans community overall. I think this is like one of those people that obviously have a crush on her. If it's not obvious, I haven't admitted that out loud, but I have a crush on Zoe Saldaña. I think she's married, and she does have kids. Anyway. Neither here nor there. I support her as a talented actress first and foremost, and then I have a crush second. But she's also one of those people that, like, social media, I'm glad we have it for people like her, because it's made me appreciate and like her even more. Seeing some of her content or her interviews that randomly pop up and things like that, she just seems like a dope human being, and like, I fuck with what she stands for and how she carries herself. And again, for her, how old is she? She's she's not up, I was gonna say she's up there in age. She's not up there in age, but you know, in Hollywood years. She's 46. And she's been doing this for a while. So the idea that she's from Passaic, New Jersey. Shout out Jersey, let's go. I like her even more now. But anyway, the fact that she is finally getting this recognition on that stage is special. And I'm not somebody, again, who like subscribes to the validation from a lot of these award shows, but as somebody who strives for greatness in what they do, it is nice to sort of be able to have that measuring stick, right? Or that tangible like place that you can reference and say like, you know, oh wow, like my career really has, I've achieved a level of greatness because I can put it up against this measuring stick that is this award show, right? And not to say those who have been nominated aren't great and things of that nature, but I think listen, as any artist, it's nice. It's nice to be recognized for your work. As much as we don't want to admit it or play that game, it is nice to be recognized for your work. And yeah, so shout out to her. Hopefully she wins. I don't think I'm gonna end up watching the Oscars. I don't care that much. I'll get the highlights online. But yeah, salute to somebody from our community who is just doing amazing things. Again, she's one of the highest grossing actresses of all time, and it's like crazy. I feel like we don't talk about her enough in that conversation. So salute to her. Hopefully she wins it. She deserves it, definitely. With that said, we will tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew.
Time for conclusion stew.
All right, I'll be quick, short, and simple with this. I'm a little nervous when it comes to things like the press pool and this attack on free speech, essentially, especially for a party that loves to talk about free speech. The media is the cornerstone, the backbone to that. And I fear that something like this is only the beginning, Even, and I think this can be separate. There's different reports, different opinions. I have mixed opinions, but even there was Joy-Ann Reid had her final show on Monday from MSNBC. She was fired. The company is moving in a different direction. They've been doing all kinds of weird firings. I think they're under a new CEO. And that's kind of like, listen, that's show business to a degree. And there's been arguments made about her ratings dropping after the election, which I think is typical of news media in general. People aren't going to be, especially this fucking election. It was like exhausting. We all need a break. But a lot of people did feel like it's because she's been so outspoken and potentially maybe the CEO is trying to sort of play both sides of the fence here in terms of appeasing the current administration. Now, that could be a stretch. I don't know. I think it goes in both directions. I could see it from both sides. I think she's a brilliant woman. I did find the show to be a bit too much like a bash Trump, gossipy kind of show rather than like, hey, let's dive into some hard facts. And not to say she's not capable of that. I think, she is, and she had some great moments and things like that. But it definitely always felt like, hey, let's get our circle together and let's make fun of this. And like, as much as I don't like the guy, it's just like, that's not what I'm here for if I'm listening to the news. But obviously she's incredibly talented. I think she's brilliant. But personally, I wasn't a fan of the show, so I'm maybe on the outside looking in on some of the opinions about it. But it's something I'm keeping an eye on. Like, I'm definitely making a mental note. Like, is this kind of the beginning of maybe some of these left-leaning platforms being a little bit scared of him? That I am watching it carefully, so we shall see. When it comes to ICE and undocumented migrants, yeah, he lied. I don't know why anybody's shocked that Donald Trump didn't keep his promise, that he backtracked on what he talked about. I don't know why anybody believes a word he says at this point. It proves what I feel like anybody with common sense has known, but sadly, I guess a lot of people didn't. This was never about just going after criminals and making our streets safer. It's about getting rid of as many brown people as you possibly can. And again, that next story about his plan to have a $5 million gold card that essentially like helps fast track citizenship to this country for people who can afford $5 million cards, again, shows you they don't have a problem with immigration. They just have a problem when it's certain people coming here. If you're a rich, probably white person, they would love to invite you in here. And again, what we've seen with gentrification, that's what our country is quickly becoming. It's not just, major cities anymore. It's everywhere for the most part. Where if you're not rich, you're being pushed out. And if you stay in the places where, livable salaries happen, the definition of livable means you're able to pay your rent or mortgage, but that's about it. You're still living check to check. And I don't think we need any more rich people making it more and more difficult for the everyday person to live, in my opinion. On a positive side of things, Zoe Saldaña, fingers crossed, she wins the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. Again, like I look at these moments and like regardless if you've seen her work or not, I'm a fan of greatness. It's inspiring to me to see greatness. Also, again, like she's been at this for a minute and she's just getting the recognition. That's inspiring for me as well, where it's like, keep at it, keep doing what you love doing, keep staying true to your art, and eventually, if you keep challenging yourself and keep progressing, you will get the confirmation in some way, shape, or form that you've been striving for. And I think that's probably what most of us are hoping for in this life if we're chasing greatness. So love to see that. Now, with that said, thank y'all so much for tuning in. I will catch you on Tuesday with a brand new episode. Till then, have an amazing weekend. Stay safe. And we'll talk soon. Peace.